Welcome to Live Answers to the Scriptures. Hope you're all having a wonderful, fabulous day today. Hope you had a wonderful Shabbat yesterday also. Hope it was filled with much shalom and edification. And we're live here today. If you'd like to call in, if you have a question about Scripture or a comment about any of the things we're talking about today, feel free to call in. The number to call in is 503-967-3001. Again, that's 503-967-3001. Okay, today we're going to be talking about just a couple different questions that came in this week. And as usual, I normally get quite a few different questions, but I don't always use them. Sometimes we do topics, but today we're going to do some questions. All right, how do you keep the command found in Deuteronomy 6, verse 9? And well, we'll start in verse 1 for a little context, for a little more context. Deuteronomy 6 and verse 1, and it says, "And this is the command, the laws and right rulings, which Yahuwah your Elohim has commanded to teach you to do in the land, which you are possessing, or you're passing over to possess, so that you fear Yahuwah your Elohim, to guard all his laws and his commands, which I command you, and your son and your grandson, all the days of your life, and that your days be prolonged." These are for our benefit, obviously. "And you shall hear, O Israel, and shall guard to do that it might be well with you, and that you increase greatly, as Yahuwah Elohim of your fathers has spoken to you, in the land flowing with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, Yahuwah your Elohim, Yahuwah is one. And you shall love Yahuwah your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, with all your might. And these words which I am commanding you today shall be in your heart, and you shall impress them upon your children, and you shall speak of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. And shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And you shall write them on your doorposts of your house and on your gates." So this was the main verse that he was talking about. But I want to give context for what everything the Father's Yah, well, not Father Yah, because it's actually Yeshua, but everything that Yah here is talking about, so that we understand exactly what it is that he's wanting us to do, why he's wanting us to do it, and the purpose for it, to write it on our doorposts of our house, which he's talking about the Ten Commandments. And this is a sign. We'll get into that a little bit more here. But so this question was asked to a group of people in one of my groups called Living the Torah. And so we always get a few different comments from different people, different perspectives, which is fine. They're not always correct, but that's fine too, because people are learning, and that's the point of this group, especially called Living the Torah. Is there's a lot of new people in there, and they're encouraged to ask questions so they can learn and grow in favor and knowledge. That's one of the things that I promote in the group, is that it's a place to learn. And some groups are very judgmental. We're not judgmental on the people. We just try to help them learn. Whereas some people say, "Oh, you have to say the name exactly like, you have to say Yahweh, or you have to say Yahuwah, or we kick you out. You're just not learned." I don't do any of those things like that. I prefer people try to use the names, but even those that don't, I don't kick them out. We try to teach them the names as they go along. But I try to develop a good learning environment for people that isn't so judgmental as some other groups that I've been in And other people have come from that tell me how judgmental they are, and that if they didn't say the name right, they got kicked out, or if they weren't as learned as they were, they got kicked out. And so we're not supposed to be like that, brothers and sisters, with especially people that are new, people that are trying to learn. We should never treat others in such a manner. The Father didn't teach us, or Yahuwah didn't teach us this way. Yahuwah he wasn't so hard on us because we didn't say the names right. And most of us started off saying the false names of God and Jesus and Lord, the names that I believe are not His. In Hebrew, Baal means Lord, and we know Jesus isn't really His name at all. That it's really a Latin, Greek, English hybrid name that really has no meaning at all. As we know, the J is only about 500 years old. So we have to teach people in the way that we were taught. He wasn't so hard on us, but we see this so much in the assemblies. We see this so much. Some places, assemblies won't even let you go to their feast site if you don't say the name exactly the way that they say it. And this is found no place in Scripture. This example of treating people in this manner is found no place in example. It is found no place, this example. But we're to write these things on our doorposts and on our gates for several reasons. Not just that it's a command, but for several reasons. We'll get into that. We'll go to verse 10. And it shall be when Yahuwah your Elohim brings you into the land of which He swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, to give you great and good cities which you did not build, and houses filled with. See, these were the things that was given to them by them obeying and doing what was told, joining covenant relationship. Verse 11, and houses filled with all kinds of goods which you did not fill, wells dug which you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant, and you shall eat and be satisfied. Be on guard lest you forget who brought you out of the land of Mizraim, from the house of bondage, out of Egypt. Fear Yahuwah your Elohim, and serve Him, and swear by His name. Do not go after other mighty ones, the mighty ones of the peoples who are around you, all around you. And see, that this again is another reminder why we put the Ten Commandments at our gates and on our doorposts. For Yahuwah your Elohim is a jealous Elohim in your midst, lest the displeasure of Yahuwah your Elohim burn against you, then He shall destroy you from the face of the earth. Do not try Yahuwah your Elohim as you tried Him in Massah. Diligently guard His commands, the commands of Yahuwah your Elohim, and His witness and His laws which He commanded you. And you shall do what is right and good in the eyes of Yahuwah, that it might be well with you. And you shall go in and possess the good land of which Yahuwah swore to your fathers, to drive out your enemies from before you, as Yahuwah has spoken. See, this is one of the things people don't get today. If our nation did this, then He would drive our enemies out from before us. But that doesn't happen the way that it's described here. Especially in Israel, it doesn't happen that way because they're not doing it exactly the way that Yahuwah has spoken it to be done. We have additions of Talmud and things like that. We'll get into that in just a minute. And again, this isn't a bash on Israel. I'm of the tribe of Judah. I'm not anti-Semitic in any way. I love my brothers and sisters in my tribe, and all tribes of Israel, and those that have been grafted in. It doesn't matter what your blood is or your color of your skin is. It doesn't matter. He's not a respecter of persons. Once you join covenant relationship, you're grafted in. You are part of Israel. Okay. When your son asks you in time to come, saying, "What is the meaning of witness and the laws and the right rulings which Yahuwah our Elohim has commanded you?" And you shall say to your son, "We were slaves of Pharaoh in Mizraim, and Yahuwah brought us out of Mizraim with a strong hand. And Yahuwah sent signs and wonders, great and grievous, upon Mizraim, Egypt, upon Pharaoh, and upon his household before our eyes. And he brought us out there to bring us in, to give us the land of which he swore to our fathers. And Yahuwah commanded us to do all these laws, to fear Yahuwah our Elohim, for our good always, to keep us alive as it is today. And it is righteousness for us when we guard to do all his commands before Yahuwah our Elohim as he commanded us. And you shall lay up these words of mine in your heart and in your being, and shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And you shall teach them to your children, speaking of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. And shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. It's repeated again, so that your days and in the days of your children are increased on the soil of which you swore to your fathers to give them. It's repeated, in Deuteronomy. We went to Deuteronomy 11, and started in verse 18. So it's repeated from Deuteronomy 6, then again it's repeated in Deuteronomy 11, in verse 20. In verse 21, it's saying the same thing, so that the days of your children are increased on the soil in which you swore to your fathers to give them as the days of the heavens. So we have this theme continued on as to why we are to be keeping the commands, why we are to be placing the Ten Commandments at our doorsteps, or at our gates, in our doorposts. These are all very important reasons. Job talks about it in a little bit different way. Job 19, verse 19, we'll go a little bit before it for context. All my intimate friends loathe me, and those whom I have loved have turned against me. I think all of us can commiserate with Job a little bit in the things that he went through, having friends loathe him, turn against him. And especially when we really dive into truth, when we're really in covenant relationship, people that we've been friends with just tend to leave, or even those that are in the way. Believers, a lot of times that we have been friends with, get lackadaisical or turn into Laodiceans. Where they feel that they're rich and increased with goods, but when they're actually really wretched and naked and poor and in need of nothing, they feel they're in need of nothing. They feel they know it all, and that their salvation is already done, and that they're just waiting for Messiah to return, and that they really don't have anything more to improve upon themselves. I've met friends like this over the years, or that just turn against Torah completely. Verse 20, my bone clings to my skin, and my flesh, and I have escaped by the skin of my teeth. Show favor to me, O you, my friends, for the hand of Eloah has struck me. Why do you persecute me like Elohim does, and are not satisfied with my flesh? Oh, that my words were written down. Oh, that they were inscribed in a book, engraved on a rock with an iron pen and lead forever. This is another way that they would put the Ten Commandments on rocks, like we found in New Mexico. And in other places, they would put the Ten Commandments on a rock, and that rock would be placed at their gates. This was another form of how they did it then. I've said before in the past, I want to do the same thing. I want to get them engraved on a rock and put them at my front door. That's something I plan to do in the future. But so this was how Job did it. Moving on to verse 25, for I know that my Redeemer lives, and as the last shall rise over the dust, and after my skin has struck off, then in my flesh I shall see Eloah, this is the singular. Eloah is the singular for Elohim. meaning mighty one or mighty ones. It can be Elohim can be a plural, depending on the context. But Eloah is always a singular of mighty one. So, all right, verse 27. Whom I myself shall see on my side, and not a stranger. My kidneys have failed within me. If you say, why do you persecute him? Seeing the root of the matter has been found in me, for the sword yourselves, for wrath brings the punishment of the sword, so that you know there is a judgment. So he understood the law, the consequences of obeying the law versus not obeying the law, and that there was punishment of the sword and or judgment that came upon people who did not. So this question was asked: how do you obey? How do you obey this? How do you obey putting the Ten Commandments basically at your front doors, at your gates, and on your walls? One person says, we got some mezuzahs and put on doorways. We also post 10 commandments near the door openings. Okay, well, the one person said, it's my understanding mezuzah is of Talmud. And so, is it though? Is the mezuzah in Scripture? If you do a word search for mezuzah, even in like what I call the very, very corrupted King James, because there's over 30,000 corruptions in it alone, there's no such thing as a perfect translation, but even in the Scriptures does have corruptions as well. I still have yet to find any translation that doesn't have corruptions. They all have some. Some have more than others. The Scriptures has far less. But even in the Scriptures, you'll never find the word mezuzah. The word just doesn't show up, not one time. Nor does it appear anywhere where we're told to put the commands on our gates. That word never does appear. Now, if you study the word mezuzah, it comes from a translation and comments that are primarily found in the Sonico Talmud. So it's not a part of Scripture at all. It is truly, the mezuzah is honestly from the Talmud. Again, this isn't a bash on my brothers of Yehuda. It's just we do need to separate what is truth from what is Scripture. The mezuzah is more of a tradition that came from the Talmud than it is of Scripture. So we're to have the full 10 Commandments posted at our gates so that people can see them, just as they were written on rocks. The 10 words, as they were called, they were written on rocks back in those days with an iron pen, as described with Job. This is how they were done. So for us today, we are to do the same. We're not to add to the word by doing a mezuzah, which you cannot even see. It's enclosed in a plastic container, which to me is very disrespectful of the 10 Commandments. And again, it is a tradition. It's just a tradition, a man-made tradition, not of Scripture. Told 4 times in Scripture, do not add to, do not take away. Deuteronomy 4:2, do not add to the word which I command you, and do not take away from it, as to guard the commands of Yahuwah, your Elohim, which I am commanding you. Deuteronomy 12:32 says, all the words I am commanding you, guard to do it, do not add to or take away. Now Proverbs 30 verse 6 is even hard, is very hardcore, because it says, do not add to his word, lest he reprove you. Okay? And you be found a liar. Okay, that's very strong, that there will be a reproof along with this. And they basically saying you're a liar if you're adding to or taking away. Especially in this position, mezuzah is, it is not, you cannot see it. It's not something that can be seen, that is a reminder. For when you go in and out of your doorways, it's something for you to see every day, which is very good. One person says the Torah is spiritual when asked the question about how do you observe Deuteronomy 6 in verse 9, one person says Torah is spiritual when the commandment is given to keep Torah on our foreheads and our doorposts. It simply means to have Torah always on our mind. everything that our hand touches, everything that we do. For Yahuwah, open the door to our hearts and ears to hear Yahuwah's voice and welcome him in. It doesn't literally mean put a Torah scroll in a little box and strap it to your head, or tie leather straps around your hands, or post a mezuzah on your door. I agree with you don't need to put a Torah scroll in a little box on your head. Again, that's another tradition of man that comes from the Talmud, along with the leather straps. So we're not, again, that's an addition to Scripture that we're not to add to or take away. So the Spirit, so we basically, the context, so basically I don't really, I had to respectfully disagree with the person. It's both spiritual and physical. It's a sign that we're his people, especially for spiritual warfare also. It is huge. It's a sign that helps us a lot. We're showing obedience to the Father and to Yahushua, to Yahushua Messiah. We're, like I said, we're to have them posted in a similar fashion at our gates, so that people see them, so that unclean spirits see them. It's another form of obedience. It's another form of saying, "Look, we're in covenant relationship. We take everything in Scripture seriously, and we obey. We obey." It's a form of obedience, of putting them up, and it's a sign to the unclean spirits, a sign to Hasatan, and it's a sign to other people as they come and see our homes. I get into discussions with several delivery people when they see them at my doorposts, talking about the Ten Commandments, talking about my beliefs of the way and of Scripture, of keeping the Torah, which we're to do, that it's for everybody and not just nailed to the cross, as so many try to say. So people, again, this is taken out of context a lot of times. So the person asks, how do you interpret the commands to keep Torah on the forehead? And I said to them, basically it's that it's a spiritual message, that we're to always be dwelling on His Word day and night, as we're told in other places in Scripture. In Joshua 1:8 it says, "Do not let this book of the Torah depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you guard to do according to all that is written in it. For then you shall make your way prosperous and act wisely." And in Psalms 1 verse 2 it says, "But his delight in the Torah of Yahuwah, and he meditates in his Torah day and night." Now there's many more scriptures. There's actually 28 in total. I'm not going to go through all of them. That talk about meditating on the Word day and night. So then he asks, how do we decipher between what is to be kept spiritual versus physical? Well, that's a great question. Some of it is context. Other parts the Ruach guides us in to differentiate between what is literal and what is spiritual. Sometimes you have to pray about this to understand it, brothers and sisters. Other times it's best to ask an elder or pastor and to seek the multitude of counsel. All right, we're going to a break, and we'll be right back. You're listening to Live Answers to the Scriptures. I'm your host, Brother Jay Scher. Shalom Tov, Shabbat Tov, and Shalom. Welcome back to Live Answers to the Scriptures. I'm your host, Jay Scher, and we're talking about a mix of questions today. And right now we've been talking about putting the Ten Commandments at our gates, and talking about how we know whether it's spiritual or physical to do some of these things was the last question that was asked. And I'll go ahead and repeat that. So a gentleman wanted to know, because he thought that basically it was all spiritual. Putting the Ten Commandments up was more just keeping them in our
in our minds, and what we do with our hands is obviously a way of showing it, which is true. What we do with our hands is, a sign of strength. Our hands are a sign of strength, and so what we do with them shows our obedience to Father Yah and to Yahushua Messiah, so that they know that we are serious about our covenant relationship with them. So the difference between what is kept spiritually and physically, a lot of times when we read in Scripture, is the context, which sometimes can be hard to understand. We need to be reading the verses before and after. Sometimes we need to read the whole chapter, or we need to compare other verses to the exact type of word study that we're doing, or other verses that are on the same subject to get the complete picture. Other times, when you're reading in Scripture, the Ruach will guide you, especially if you've been immersed in the true names of Messiah and not in the old names of what Messiah's name isn't, the false names of Messiah, instead of the forever names, and the forever understanding the forever covenant and the forever commands that we're to keep. The Ruach will guide you at times. Sometimes you have to pray about it. Pray about the message that you're reading, the verses that you're reading, in order to understand. Other times, it can be a really good thing to ask an elder or a minister or a pastor, evangelist, what they feel it reads, or seek the multitude of counsel. Ask several people about it. Normally, when you ask an elder or a pastor, or a minister, evangelist, they're gonna have a pretty solid understanding of most Scripture, because they've been reading it and have been walking in it for many years. They have a solid foundation underneath their belts of it. The more you read Scripture, the more you're going to understand it. If you only read a little bit each day, you're not going to understand very much of it. But if you've been reading it over the years quite a bit, especially if you read it every day, then you're going to understand the writers and who's writing it, and kind of their style of writing. And like Shaul, he's a very wordy guy. You're gonna understand more of what he's talking about, because you start to understand the man himself, the writer himself, of who he is and what he actually stands for, and not thinking that he's actually against Torah, where so many people think he is against Torah, when he's not. He teaches Torah all the time. So, personally, myself, as an elder, pastor, historian, and of course, I'm here on Hebrew Nation, but all glory to Father Yah. I'm just a servant, nothing more, but I have been reading it and walking in it for over 35 years. I'm older than 35, much older than 35, but I just throw that number out because it's more in context. So this again, it's a huge sign, especially in spiritual warfare, that we do. So normally I put the 10 Commandments up, and I list them as starting off in Exodus 20 and verse 2, which says, "I am Yahuwah your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of the house of slavery," so that it explains who it is that you're speaking of. And then I go into, and I use the scriptures, the ISR scriptures, and I just print them out as such, going from Exodus 20 verse 2 all the way through, all the way down through verse 17 to the last 10 command, which is, "Do not covet your neighbor's house, do not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, or whatever belongs to your neighbor." So like I said, having all of these printed out, when you walk by them and see them each day, it's a reminder It's a physical reminder of what we are to be doing in our lives daily, how we are to be behaving. It's a declaration of who we are to the world. It shows Father Yah that we're serious, that we fear Him, we respect the written word, and that we want to obey Him. When we see this every day coming in, going throughout our homes, and it's a constant reminder. Plus, like I said, the delivery people or your neighbors see it. They know what you're about, and you're able to share your beliefs. And this is in addition to our seats, of course, that both men and women should be wearing. It's not just a male thing, because it's the same word that's in Leviticus 23 that telling us, and in other places that talk about the children of Israel, it's not just the Bian, which many Jewish people feel it's just sons only, and that it's male clothing, which in my opinion, I don't believe that to be true, because if you do a word study on it, again, it's the same one word that you find in Leviticus 23. That would mean that women aren't to be keeping the Shabbat or the other high feast days, which isn't true. And so if you're interested, you can always email me. I'm happy to give you the word study that I have on it, which shows both men and women should be wearing them. Just JAY at HebrewNationRadio.net. Or J is walking in the way at gmail.com. Okay, so these are things that we need to be doing in order to show respect and honor, that we fear Him, that we want to obey Him. As a constant reminder. All right, next question. Please help me to understand these Romans 14, 1 through 6, 10 through 12, and Mark 7, 17 through 23. All right, wonderful. We'll start in, okay, so Romans 1 through 6. And receive him who is weak in the belief, not criticizing his thoughts. One indeed believes to eat all food, but he who is weak only eats vegetables. So we're starting off with verse 1. And receive him who is weak in the belief, not criticizing his thoughts. But in other words, when we talk to somebody and we receive them in, or especially into our home or into our life in any way, shape, or form, and they don't know the things that we know, we don't start off criticizing how they believe and their thoughts. We want to bring them in gently and start teaching them slowly, start giving them milk, and not immediately, calling, oh, you're a pagan, you worship on Sunday, you keep Christmas, Easter, Halloween, you do all of these evil things, you're such an evil pagan, and blah, blah, blah. We don't do that. We bring them in gently, we start giving them milk to chew on, and we gently teach them. The next verse, one indeed he believes to eat all food, but he who is weak eats only vegetables. Today there's a lot of people that are vegans, just as there was people back then that felt they needed to eat vegetables. But here, it's also talking about he who is weak. When people are sick, they don't eat a lot of meat, especially red meat. Red meat contains a form of acid in it. Even organic meat or red meat still contains a form of acid in it that is not good for digestion. And especially people that have problems with digestion or that are not absorbing their nutrients properly want to stay away from red meat. Myself personally, I have a problem absorbing nutrients from the food that I eat, so I personally don't eat red meat at this time until I'm healthier. Then I'll go back and I'll eat some occasionally. Right now I just eat mostly like chicken and not much fish because it's contaminated so much with I don't eat any West Coast fish, especially because it's Fukushima. It's contaminated with radiation and high levels of mercury. So I'll eat some from the Atlantic. That's wild caught, only wild caught only. I don't eat anything that's farm raised because they feed it soy and corn. Most corn is GMO'd corn, and soy is very bad for you as well. So soy makes tumors. A lot of people have tumors in their bodies. Even what they claim to be organic soy, there's really no such thing as organic soy. Soy is actually very bad for you. So farm-raised fish, unless you know the person that's farm-raising it, that's doing aquaponics, and is feeding the fish supplemental food in addition to the nutrition it receives from the actual plants, because in aquaponics the plants usually are feeding the fish nutrients from it. I myself have gotten into aquaponics. I don't have an aquaponics system where I live at this time, but the next move I'm sure I'll have one there. So these are things that people believe in, that some don't even eat any meat at all. They're just strictly on a vegetable diet because of how sick they are. That's why it's saying who is weak eats only vegetables. So this is something that we need to keep in mind. The next verse, he that eats, let him not despise him who does not eat. And he that does not eat, let him not judge him who eats, or for Elohim received him. So, in other words, still the same manner. A person who's not eating what the other person eats, Elohim, Father Yah, still going to receive him, just because he's not eating what someone else is eating. And now, we're not talking about unclean foods. We have to understand the audience and who he's speaking to. Shaul is speaking to the Romans here. The audience is people that eat clean food. Okay, this is not people that eat unclean food. This was the assembly there in in Rome. So a lot of people take this out of context and think that he's talking about unclean food as we get into the next few verses. But he's not talking about unclean food. He's talking to believers. He's talking to people that eat according to all of the clean food commands. All right, verse 4. Who are you that judges another servant? To his own master he stands or falls, but he shall be made to stand, for Elohim is able to make him stand. Again, this is going back to the food. One indeed judges one day above another. Another judges every day alike. Let each one be completely persuaded in his own mind. Some people, just like it says, they judge one day as better than another day. Some think every day is the same as another, and there's no difference. Verse 6, he who minds the day minds it to Yahuwah, and he who does not mind the day to Yahuwah, he doesn't mind it. He who eats meat, he who eats to Yahuwah. So again, like I said, we're still talking about food. We're not talking about any other things here. He who eats to Yahuwah, for he gives Elohim thanks. He who does not eat to Yahuwah, he does not eat and gives thanks. So here, I think we're talking about fasting for him who does not eat, or who does not eat meat. It could be a dual message here. It could be talking about fasting. It could also be talking about, again, he who does not eat meat still gives thanks to Elohim. He's still giving thanks to Yah for his food, or during the time of fasting. Verse 7. For not one of us lives to himself, and not one dies to himself. So again, he's still speaking to believers. He's still speaking to those of the way, of the congregation or assembly in Rome. For both, if we live unto the Master, and if we die unto the Master. Speaking about the Master of Yahushua Messiah here. Therefore, whether we live or die, we are the Master's, because he paid for us. With his blood, we were bought and paid for. For unto this the Messiah died and rose and lived again, to rule over both the dead and the living. There's talking about the the dead and the living, those that are spiritually dead and those that are living. It could also be talking about those that are dead in Messiah and the living also, but it's talking about ruling over them, so that would mean they'd have to be alive. So he's talking about the dead, spiritually dead, those that are spiritually dead and those that are spiritually living. Here's the example. But why do you judge your brother, or why do you despise your brother? For we shall all stand before the judgment seat of Messiah. This isn't saying that we're not to judge. This is saying specifically again about talking about the food. Because some people are so judgmental that they cause their brothers to stumble over these things in which they should not do. Because there's other verses in which he talks about judging, and we'll get to those here in a minute. So again, this is just talking about judgment about the food, and they also could have been judging the condemnation also, which we're not to do. We're only to judge people by their fruits. No pun intended, not just the fruits that they're eating. Or why do you despise your brother? For we shall all stand before the judgment seat of Messiah, which is very true. So again, not to condemnation, only by their fruits are we to judge them, which we'll get to in a minute. For it has been written, as I live, says Yahuwah, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue shall confess to Elohim. Each one of us therefore shall give account of himself to Elohim. So the Romans were definitely having a problem with being too judgmental, judging the condemnation, being overly judgmental about what people were eating. Those that were ill, only eating vegetables and not eating a bunch of meat. You still should eat a little bit of meat because you do need protein. But again, we shouldn't be so judgmental of others, so as not to cause another to stumble. Romans 14:13. Therefore, let us not judge one another any longer, but rather judge this, not to put an obstacle or a stumbling block in another brother's way, as I was just saying. So don't judge somebody to the point of their eating habits as to throw a stumbling block in them. Now there's a right way and a wrong way to do this, to judge, and when it's done in love, it's very proper and of Scripture. We have to discern them by their fruits. Again, no pun intended. We have to judge by their fruits, but never to condemnation, because that's not our job. We have not been chosen as the bride of Messiah to be the saints in which we will judge over others. So if we see people backsliding, we don't, and especially our kids or other brothers. If you have kids, you don't want to have them hanging around other kids that are bad. Or until they get through it. We're told to judge a person by their fruits, and do Matthew 18 with them. I've had to tell my kids not to hang out with other kids before because of their fruit and the things that they said. I overheard one kid telling my kid who if he could kill anybody and get away with it, who would he kill? Well, guess what? My kid didn't hang out with that kid. Or for a very long time, until the kid changed his ways. I think I let him hang out with him maybe a year later, after the kid had changed a bit. So, but Matthew 18 is very clear. And if your brother sins against you, go and reprove him. So again, that's a judgment. You're reproving him between you and him alone. If he hears you, you have gained a brother. But if he does not hear, take with you one or two more, that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word might be established. And if he refuses to hear them, say it to the assembly. And if he refuses even to hear the assembly, let him be like a Gentile or tax collector to you. So this is judgment. This is not what Shaul is saying to the Romans, because Messiah's own words. He's not going to go against Messiah's own words. He did not come along to preach another gospel. Matthew 7 verse 16, again Messiah's own words, by their fruits you shall know them. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles? So every good tree yields good fruit, but a rotten tree yields wicked fruit. And a good tree is unable to yield wicked fruit, and a rotten tree to yield good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So then by their fruits you shall know them. Again, this is judging. He's telling us. These are Messiah's own words. Shaul is not going to go against Messiah. So you're just not understanding them if you think that Shaul is telling us not to judge anybody at all. Not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, shall enter into the reigns of the heavens, but he who is doing the desire of my Father in the heavens. Many shall say to me in that day, Master, Master, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many mighty works in your name? And then I shall declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work lawlessness. These are so many people today think that they're doing all these things in his name, but they don't keep the commands of Scripture. They don't keep his Shabbats. They don't keep his feast days. They don't keep the clean food laws. They still observe sun worship. They still observe Christmas, Easter, Halloween, all the man-made traditions, and so on. Do we not know that we shall judge messengers one day? 1 Corinthians 6:1. Should any of you holding a matter against another go to be judged before the unrighteous and not before the set-apart ones? In other words, they had judges set up, which we should have ourselves. It's one of the big problems in the assemblies is they never set up any judges to rule over those set-apart ones, which is a big mistake. We should have done that a long time ago, especially in the States. So, in other words, why go be judged before the unrighteous? Why go to the court system instead of the set-apart ones? Verse 2, do you not know that the set-apart ones shall judge the world? And if the world is judged by you, are you unworthy to judge the smallest matters? So again, here we're being told that we should be judging the smallest matters that are going on. And that it's not saying to not judge, which so many people take out of context. 1 Corinthians 6 verse 3, do you not know that we shall judge messengers? How much more matters of this life? And that this is what so many people take out of context again, and I still hear it often. Just the other day, the people are saying, don't judge me, don't judge one another. We're not to judge each other. Don't judge another brother. That's nowhere in Scripture. You're misunderstanding it. 1 Corinthians 15:33. Do not be led astray. Evil company corrupts good habits. Well, if we're not judging what evil company is, how do we know what evil company is to start with? Okay? 1 Corinthians 6:3. If anyone teaches differently and does not agree to the sound words, those of our Master Yahushua Messiah, and to the teachings which is accordance to reference, he is puffed up, understanding none at all, but sick about questionings, verbal battles, which come from envy, strife, slander, wicked suspicion. Worthless disputes of incorrupt minds. Withdraw from such. So again, these are all things we are supposed to judge. I didn't get to the last question. I'll have to pick it up next week. I hope you enjoyed this week's show. Shabbatot, Shabbatot. I'm your host, Jay Shearer. You're listening to Live Answers to the Scriptures.